What's up, everybody? This is Jeff Needs Sports. I'm Jeff. That's Chris, the Prez. That's Mo, the VP, and that's Rob, the Goat, as in a cruise island. And we got a star-studded show. We got the gang back together, and we're about to tell you everything you need to know about the college football season and why Ohio State lost to Northwestern this weekend, and everything else you need to know. Maybe a little Miami talk since we got Prez on. This is Jeff D Sports, and this is College Football Reaction Show. Gentlemen, what is up? A shockingly great weekend of college football. Action just happened. We knew that eventually, teams were going to get, quote unquote, upset. We knew that people were getting knocked off the top. This is why the playoff committee comes out with their rankings the week before all these teams start playing each other. They get a catapult onto that. And it happened. We had some big wins. We had some big losses. We had some terrible performances. We had some, standout performances. I don't even know where to begin. But first of all, I got Chris LeBron from Off the Ball Podcast, President Off the Ball Network with me. Chris, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good. There was a football game in Florida that apparently happened. I didn't, I don't know nothing about that, but so I'm hurting, but I'm here.
And we appreciate it. Mo from Up in Flames. This has become kind of a weekly thing with you. We know you're an Ohio State fan. So what's your general temperature right now on the college football season so far?
Well, Jeff, it's not a coincidence that Ohio State played the way they did, and I woke up this morning sick, under the weather, voice didn't change a little bit. So it's not a coincidence because, they made
it's contagious.
I'm convinced. Ohio State made me sick. But at the end of the day, what matters is the loss column because of you, Jeff.
Fair.
And at the end of the day, there is no number outside of a 0 in Ohio State's loss column, and we live to fight another day.
Oh, right. And for the first time this season on the College Football Show, and a longtime friend, I'm a big fan of his from way back. We got Rob Cruz from Cruise Island on the show from the left coast to tell us about why the Pac-12/Pac-10 is going to win the championship. I assume that's what he's here for. Cruz, what is up, man?
Man, good weekend of college football. I had a lot of fun watching the games. Luckily, my team scored some touchdowns. We can't all say that today. But hey, there's always next week, right, Prez?
I don't know about that.
Brad's been waiting on next week for a minute. So without further ado, we got a jam-packed show. A lot of stuff happened. We're gonna start with biggest winners. I have no idea how to organize this, how to go around the horn. You guys know the deal. If we all agree on one, we'll just talk about it and move on. We're gonna do biggest winners first, and I'm gonna start with Chris. One of your biggest winners for week 10.
The biggest winners from week 10 is people who are over the Alabama dominance and how they were kind of held their own destiny, but Tennessee didn't. I think we finally are going to have a year where we don't have to worry about Alabama being in the playoff. And listen, they had some close losses. I mean, they literally lost at the gun twice. So they're so close from being, in the playoff, but it seems like that it's over. And also it's Georgia too. I think we kind of forgot how good Georgia is. Yeah, they lost their best defender. He's out for the year, but Georgia, they showed it. And we talked about it on Field Stormers. I was like, I think Georgia's going to come in and have a statement game and show the country hey, y'all riding the Tennessee wave. We're still the defending national champions, and they came in and showed it. So, Georgia, their dominance, and then people who, are just tired of Bama. Guess what? We might not have Bama in the. You can never still count them out, but it's most likely they won't be, in the playoff picture.
Yeah, they're done. They're done.
So, I think people are finally okay, some fresh faces. We might see a new fresh face. No more Nick Saban in the playoffs. So, I think I'm going to go with that.
Mo Murphy, winners.
Um,
Oh, winner. You don't have to give me an all. I know you got a bunch. You're always
no,
prepared.
I
You're
just
deep.
have no. Yes, it's deep, but it's an overall conversation. I still say the Pac-12.
Okay.
The biggest winner is the Pac-12 for the simple fact, you can say what you want as a USC fan, but they gutted out a big win. Oregon absolutely dominated in a W, and so with the way the weekend went, you look at you look at the Pac-12, and you're like, okay, it looks like it's going to come down to Oregon versus USC in the conference championship. UCLA still has a pitch for it because they also won the game, but I say the Pac-12 because in 2 to 3 weeks time span, the Pac-12 has now looked what we looked at the Big 12 3 weeks ago. Like it is now how we looked at the Big 12 is now the Pac-12 from 3 weeks ago. So I look at the Pac-12 and I'm like, they got to be the biggest winners because Oregon won big. USC was able to pull out another win. UCLA was able to pull out another win. And so I think, looking forward to the future, we're looking at USC and UCLA is going to be prime time football going into rivalry week. And then the winner of that going to probably play Oregon is what we're looking at. That's going to make the Pac-12 championship really worth watching because that Pac-12 championship for the first time in a few years is actually going to have playoff implications 100%. So I would have to say the Pac-12 is the biggest winners for the simple fact we are going to be paying attention to USC, Oregon, and UCLA, and we're going to pay attention to Oregon, and we'll get into that later, but we're going to be paying attention to Pac-12 for the simple fact the three biggest teams won this week, and we're going to see how they fare out for the rest of the year because it will have playoff implications at the end of the season.
No, I like that. The Pac-12 has been very good this year. They've continued looking good. SEC on across the board has taken a step back. One of my biggest winners I'll bring up here in a second as to why. But I love what you're saying. These teams are good. They're not fake good. You know what I mean? They're not out there playing by themselves and nobody gets to judge them. Like they're legit good teams. I wouldn't want to play, I wouldn't want to play any of those teams right now. If I'm another school. So yeah, I like that. So Cruz, we'll piggyback on that. Your first time on the show, winners from week 10.
So I was gonna go the Pac-12, but Mo took
Go
it.
ahead.
Which he hit everything. He hit everything perfectly. Everything coming up on the 19th, USC UCLA. As of right now, it's going to be a top 10 matchup. It's going to be a huge game, and then obviously Notre Dame the week after that. But I want to go to another team that was disrespected last week in the college football playoff rankings, and then finally everything worked out in their favor. And TCU.
Okay.
Again, a lot of people felt they were disrespected last week.
They were. You're right.
Which they were.
They clearly were. They clearly were.
Yeah, big time.
And they went in. I think they played Oklahoma State this week.
Texas
Tech last week.
Yeah, they played Texas Tech this week.
Oh, Texas Tech. They went in, handled business. They did what they needed to do, and the dominoes fell that they needed to fall. And right now in the AP poll, they're number 4 in the AP and the coaches poll, and I expect them to be there as well for the college football playoff rankings as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like TCU it's double-sided. TCU, everything happened that we knew would happen, but I hate it because the college football playoff committee gets off easy because it worked itself out, which we knew it was going to, but like just rank TCU higher than Clemson, you wouldn't have had this problem. Now they're going to be like, oh, no, everything worked itself out. Well, if it's going to work itself out again, I would say this, then don't do the rankings. Like do them this week or do them later week. But yeah, shout out to TCU. They did what they needed to do. Actually just one of my winners before I get into a couple of mine. Shout out to every team who just won and are in contention because not lost, but 3 contenders lost this weekend. So if you just didn't lose, a la, Ohio State, TCU played an all right game. Most weekends that TCU game would have been criticized, but when you have Ohio State looking like they do, when you have Alabama losing, when you have Tennessee getting handled, for 3 quarters, then TCU is just like it erases the degree of difficulty. They won and they did it. So yes, you're correct. TCU was a big winner. Now everything should be righted. Now we can focus on the rest of the season. But that's true. And another one I had to kind of piggyback on everything. One of my winners was college football fans. And when I say college football fans, I don't mean if you're a fan of a college football team and watch that team. I mean, if you're a fan of the sport, like if you're like us who are like, oh my God, Tennessee, Georgia's a big game, or UCLA, USC coming up is a big game. Congratulations to you. It was a surprisingly good Saturday. You got to sit for almost 3 hours and wonder if the number 2 team in the country was going to lose. You got to see 2 of the best teams go at it, go to overtime. You got to see, the number 1 team in the country, go up against, the defending champion, like all of these things. You got to see, USC survive, UCLA survive, like we talked about, to set up the game. You got to see Notre Dame, like if you're a fan of the sport, Notre Dame's a factor. You got to see them flex their muscles and beat a Clemson team that you either like Clemson or you don't like Clemson. So that was big. So like just general college football fans, it's been a great season just to watch the sport. This was a great weekend for it. Like we're at a dueling piano bar last night, and there's probably 15 people crowded around like a mobile phone watching the overtime of the Alabama game. That's what it's about. You know what I mean? In Columbus, Ohio, like this is like all this comes together. So if you're a fan of the sport, big win. Another one I want to talk about, and you guys kind of touched on it, and we'll talk about, like, is this the downfall of Alabama? The transfer portal, another winning weekend. Like let's talk about, like, Jaden Daniel just that played for Arizona State last year, just knocked off Alabama and most likely knocked them out of the playoffs, as to where what I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 years ago that wasn't even possible. Now this kid's in national championship contention. Bo Nix, who was up and down at Auburn. We see what Auburn, like, there might be some more like systematic problems there. Bo Nix is in Oregon, and I'm telling you right now, is playing as well as anybody in the country and has a very good shot at winning the Heisman Trophy, if you care about that. Like, that's amazing. All these kids, that were like, things aren't going right here and moved on to another team, are having a huge impact on college football. Without the transfer portal, Alabama's undefeated right now. Like, that's just the truth of it. Like, they're still playing. I mean, they almost lost to Texas. That's Quinn Ewers, transfer portal. Like, it's just like, no matter how deep you want to go, Tennessee's probably the only team, but I believe Hooker, I think he went through the transfer portal early. It's been, it's been a few years now, but like all of these things. So like a big winner, as far as, the impact on college football, the transfer portal. Another big winner. Then we'll kind of go around and talk about these. I'm not trying to like cancel you guys out. Brian Kelly. I don't like the dude. I like his attitude, like everything about him. This dude went to LSU, took a transfer quarterback who not even like a highly rated transfer quarterback. I call him the Slim Reaper. I love the guy, but I mean, it wasn't somebody that like moved the needle. And then he just knocked off Alabama and has his team in contention to win the SEC and have a shot at the college football playoff. He's just proven he's a good football coach. I believe, like, I want to say like half their team isn't even there that was there last year. It's a pretty good story. So it's literally just like, just tell me who my guys are and I'll coach them. And one more guy. We'll get on to it, Mo. One more guy, Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett's like, yeah, you guys can talk about Bo Nix. You can talk about CJ Stroud. You can talk about Bryce Young. You can talk about all these guys across the country. And Stetson Bennett's like, hold my beer. And I think he might have literally drank a beer before the game started. Like, I want Stetson Bennett to be my quarterback so bad. Gets on the field, waxes Tennessee, does it with a swagger, a confidence, and an excitement. So all those big winners this weekend.
Yeah. So Jeff, just real quick, what I want to say is, when you talk about Brian Kelly being one of the biggest winners, first off, I 100% agree with you, but I think this win makes you appreciate Brian Kelly has been a great coach, like him or
for years.
Not. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you said that. Like him or not, you can't knock how great of a coach he's been. I mean, when you look at Notre Dame and we're like, oh, Marcus Freeman is going against the fact that you can't recruit some of the top athletes in the country because of Notre Dame's, academic standards or whatever. And you're like, well, Brian Kelly has had them as playoff contenders, national championship contenders for years. We see he leaves, and we see the difference in Notre Dame has won 2 huge games in the past 2 weeks. But at the same time, we're like, they lost to Marshall, didn't look the greatest against Ohio State. And so you look at Brian Kelly and you're like, okay, he goes to the SEC, and it was the opportunity for Brian Kelly to prove how good of a coach he is. And he's had some big wins. Like, okay, he lost to Florida State first week of the season, and that was his first time coaching at LSU, right? And then we see the recruiting class that he's got coming in next year. He beat Alabama. I know he got blown by Tennessee, but Tennessee was rolling at the time. And so you can pick how you kill Brian Kelly in a sense throughout the season, but like he won the game of all games at this point, and he has an opportunity where this is a chance for Brian Kelly to stamp how great of a coach he is, because LSU has an opportunity to win the SEC. Like whether you like it or not, like if LSU wins out, plays in the SEC championship, like they'll projection wise will be playing Georgia to win the SEC championship. And so I'm fully with you as far as Brian Kelly, because I think now he gets appreciated, because we see guys who are not in the SEC as coaches, and they're at Notre Dame and they're at Ohio State, right, or whatever. They're in the Big 10, Big 12 or whatever. And as soon as they come to the SEC, can you do what you did wherever you're at in the SEC? And essentially, like, yes, Brian Kelly has 2 losses, but he has an opportunity to win the SEC. So Brian Kelly shows you he's a great coach. So I definitely have to salute Brian Kelly for the simple fact, not only has he showed he's a great coach, but Brian Kelly has an opportunity to be the coach of a team that could shake up the whole college football playoff. If LSU was to win out and win the SEC, it shakes up the whole college football playoff, and that's due to great coaching in Brian Kelly.
Well, Brian Kelly, his team, real quick, this is who we thought Texas A&M was. Like, this is who we thought they were going to be surprisingly good. That these new kids were going to be good. That the coach they're finally going to knock off Alabama, be a threat to Georgia. And then it's another reason to where at some point, just like I say this about Oregon, and we'll go to Chris and Cruz, real quick here. This is what I said about Oregon this week. Their loss to Georgia wasn't as bad as Tennessee's, because at the beginning of the season, you got a new coach, a new quarterback, trying to figure out how you're going to do things. Things got out of control. Tennessee was rolling when they played Georgia and got squashed. Like I completely like ignore that loss to Georgia by Oregon in the first game of the season, much like I do Notre Dame. Like the Notre Dame team that played Ohio State is not the same Notre Dame team that's playing now. Again, another winner is like, if you want 12-team college playoff, this is why, because things change so much as the season goes on. We shouldn't be stuck like Clemson. We almost got stuck with Clemson because they were undefeated, as opposed to letting our eyeballs look at. And I say that about Ohio State now. Ohio State has no business being anywhere near the top 4 right now until they beat Michigan. Like, I don't even want to hear about Ohio State being ranked second. Absurd right now, but they're there because they haven't lost. They have no argument except for they have a 0 in the loss column. That's where, LSU has gotten better, and they've kind of proved it. They showed up against Alabama. So that's the thing. Like, at some point in college football, we have to be able to excuse some of these losses and understand what we saw and understand what went on. And that a team 2.5 months ago with a bunch of 20-year-olds is not the same team that we're getting now.
You think they kicked themselves LSU for that blunder against with Florida State? Like,
I sure do.
We have that. We're in that in that conversation to be in the
they're in the top 4 right now.
Yeah.
Oh, they're definitely kicking themselves in the ass as far as.
But they need Florida State to keep winning too to make that loss. Now
I don't think it matters anymore. I think that LSU is
overcome that.
No, I
Florida State's been playing a lot better.
I think that most of these teams, and this is also a problem if you go undefeated late into the season. Now it's too late to have a loss excused, as to where Oregon and LSU are fine. They've wiped that off, and they're like, okay, we've moved on from it. Yeah. But now, if you like, Tennessee might have lost just in time. You know what I mean? Like, and to forget it, maybe, but these other teams like Ohio State can't lose now. Michigan can't lose now. TCU cannot lose now. As to where if you lose week 1, you have time to fix that. LSU's got the benefit of the doubt. They proved it. They stood up and they did it. And they are where they are right now. I mean, they're the
but LSU got 2 losses. That's the only.
It's not going to matter.
It
doesn't matter if they win out. Is what I'm saying. Like if they lose, yes, 3 losses.
Well, if they win out, it shakes up.
If they went out, they're in. It's done.
Playoffs. Conversation for another day. Because if LSU wins out,
and if they went out, they'll beat Alabama.
We're not going to create a scenario of like what. Yeah, but they also got smacked by Tennessee. So if LSU wins out and they're a 2-loss SEC team and they're able to get in, either one of 2 options happen. Either A, all the other teams have did what they needed to do as far as for LSU to allow to get in, or B, there's an SEC bias and it's like no matter what the playoff scenario is, a SEC team gets in. And I think that would be the statement you would be setting by LSU being a 2-loss SEC champion getting in is like no matter what happens, a SEC team is getting in just for winning the conference. So
but they should. Like they absolutely should.
But they lost to Florida State. I'm just saying they lost to Florida State.
I would tell you this. That loss to Florida State wasn't as bad as what Ohio State did Saturday. Like I'll tell you that right now. Ohio State played the worst game. Ohio State played the worst game of any contender this season Saturday.
And won.
But Jeff, they won though. They won.
They won.
And
I'm telling you right now. The committee.
We're not doing this.
Does not care about the loss column.
But
we're not into Ohio State. Ohio State had the worst performance of a college football playoff.
Yeah, we're going to get to them in Biggest Losers.
No, we're not.
Biggest Losers this weekend was Jeff.
You guys are Jeff's sanity.
Jeff's sanity.
Cruz, your thoughts on the biggest winners that we've discussed so far. What stands out to you?
I mean, we all pretty much hit biggest winners. There's nothing that I can really argue with. Again, I do like your take, Jeff, that just overall just a college football fan in general. Like we did win. We had a great week of college football, setting up for a very, very fun, exciting next 3 weeks. I think I don't know how I can't see a 2-loss LSU team getting in.
Oh, they're absolutely going to get in
if they run the tail.
That's tough.
Tough. Okay, so let's just work this out for a second. Does anybody here think that Georgia's not number 1?
They're number 1
by
for sure, 100%.
Okay, no,
by a couple steps, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So if you tell me LSU is going to beat Alabama and then beat Georgia, who we know is rolling right now, and then you're going to tell them they're not good enough to play in the college football playoffs, they're going to beat the number 1 team in the country and then you're going to tell them they can't get in because of week 1 with a new coach and a transfer portal quarterback against Florida State. Like,
yes,
that's ridiculous.
Can I tell you why, Jeff?
That is.
I'll tell you why.
No, there is no way that's going to happen. Nobody. So wait a minute. You're going to tell me this.
Yes.
Here's the scenario though, because if LSU keeps winning, Georgia's going to keep winning. LSU is going to be because either Michigan or Ohio State will have lost, so they're going to be above that other team.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They're going to be above, let me see. UCLA or USC. One of them's going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But they're only going to have a couple teams to jump. So they're going to be like, we'll say they're 5th or 6th in the country at worst, if everything keeps going this way. They're going to beat the number 1 team in the country, and they're going to be like, nah. And they're going to put TCU, Michigan, Oregon, and who else would even be left?
Ohio State. Why?
Ohio State loses her out.
Michigan.
Okay, we'll say Ohio State, TCU, Ohio State, Oregon, or we'll say USC. Either one of those. You're telling me LSU is not going to get that last spot? Who are they going to give it to?
All right, I think Jeff convinced me.
Who would they give it to?
Yeah, because listen, Michigan, Ohio State's going to cancel. One of them's
They're going to
not
cancel.
gonna
Yeah,
be there.
one of
They're
them
gonna
is
cancel
not.
each other
their
out.
only loss.
That'll be their only loss. So one of
Okay.
them's going to be out.
But
Mhm.
they
All right.
don't get to play that next game. We're talking.
Right.
Let me be clear. We're talking about an LSU team that beats Georgia in the SEC championship game.
I get
Okay,
that.
so
But
let's say Ohio
They
State.
are two big teams. Wait a minute. Let's stop this.
Georgia
right
falls
now.
to 4 and they still get in.
I'll be
Let's
back.
stop
Go
this right now. Two Big Ten teams are
Georgia
not
would still
getting in
probably get in,
over
yeah.
LSU if they win out. That is ridiculous.
I would agree with you, but go ahead, Chris. Say why Jeff
Okay.
is 100% right.
All right. So right, we have LSU at 7 right now. Let's just say,
Mhm.
all right, the only team right ahead of Oregon, they would bump. Georgia would go down, right? Ohio State, Michigan cancel each other out. So let's say it's Ohio State. Ohio State goes to 1. LSU goes to 2. TCU. But what if TCU? Like there is a way. There's definitely
I'm
a
saying if
path for
everybody
them
went
to
down
get
because
there. Yeah.
if LSU beats Georgia, you can't be like Georgia. So here's what Mo's saying. Mo's saying that Georgia would go and LSU wouldn't if LSU beats them. That's what Mo's saying.
Here's what I'm
That's
going to say.
what would have to happen, Mo.
Okay. And you want me to tell you why I would be okay with that? Because there is not a scenario while we were in the world of 4-team playoff that a two-loss team should be in a playoff under any. The scenario would have to be so extreme.
It's happened before.
I don't know. No, it hasn't.
Yes.
Here's my problem with
In
it.
BCS, what two-loss team has made a college football playoff? I don't care about BCS. Here's why. Because we're in the playoff era now. And there is not a scenario. I don't care how sticky it gets. It would have to get so crazy for a two-loss team to be in the playoff. And I'm going to tell you why. LSU lost to Florida State and they lost to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Them winning the SEC cannot be good enough unless you're just telling me under any circumstance the SEC champion is getting in. I don't care what happens. And so if LSU gets in, then that's exactly what you're telling me. Because if Ohio State and Michigan are undefeated and they play each other, and we'll go for close team's sake, let's say Ohio State beats Michigan 42-39, and LSU wins the SEC as a two-loss team. What did Michigan do to tell you that LSU was better than Michigan when they lost to Ohio State 42-39? Like, because they lost to Florida State, they got blown.
I would say that but if I was LSU, I would be like, if I was LSU in this scenario, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan, whoever loses this game will have played one good game.
But we'll
lost it. Michigan plays one game this year.
That game is huge.
But we will. But here's
if they lose it, you're gonna look at LSU and be like, you beat Alabama and Georgia, not good enough. But the only reason that Michigan and Ohio State are undefeated, but the only reason that Michigan and Ohio State are undefeated is because they didn't like. If Ohio State played Tennessee last weekend, they lose.
If they played if they played
in a fucking dome. Come on, Mo.
But no. So listen to me though. All I'm saying is this: it's not even about Ohio State. I could care less about Ohio State in this argument. All I'm saying is that beating Alabama, who is a two-loss team now, is all of a sudden national championship contenders, and then you go and beat Georgia, but you didn't beat Florida State and you got smacked by Tennessee, and we're like, oh yeah, they could play for a national championship when they lost to Florida State and got smacked by Tennessee.
Okay. So
when we get I agree with you.
I get it. But what in your scenario, you're either putting the ACC champion in, or you're putting two teams from one conference in.
No,
over LSU.
So
the SEC champion.
In my scenario, okay. So we're gonna go overall scenario.
Are you assuming TCU wins out?
So listen,
I'm saying if everybody wins out.
If this is this based off if the teams ahead of LSU right now,
TCU, Ohio,
TCU, Oregon, Tennessee, Michigan, those teams.
They'll jump. I think they'll jump.
I'm not assuming Michigan.
Oh, you know what? Yeah,
we're assuming.
I'll give you Tennessee, but I'll give you Tennessee.
So
Real quick. I'll give you my scenario on why LSU doesn't get in. If Oregon or USC wins out, that's one. That's a playoff team.
Yeah, they're in. I totally agree.
If Ohio State or Michigan wins out, so that's two.
That's
because that'll create an undefeated Big Ten championship team. If it's not even about if Clemson wins out, I think a one-loss Clemson team should get in.
No.
Over a two-loss team.
No.
Yes.
Hell no.
No. Here's what's gonna happen.
Yes.
Here's what's gonna happen.
Yes.
Here's what's gonna happen.
No.
Let's say everybody else ahead of LSU. Let's say everybody ahead of LSU wins out. I'm including Oregon. Let's say Oregon beats SC. If SC beats UCLA, Oregon beats SC in the Pac-12 championship game. Like you said, that's one.
Okay.
TCU wins out. That's two. Winner of Ohio State, Michigan wins the Big Ten. That's three. If LSU does beat Georgia, unless it is a complete mollywop of Georgia, I mean, anything less than a 14-point win, Georgia's dropping to 4, and there's your fourth team right there.
So this is my problem. So this is my problem with this. So what we're saying is Georgia, and I said this last year. I swear to God, I said it last year. Go back and listen to Jeff Needs Sports. I said it on the podcast. Once again, we're at a point to where there is zero reason for Georgia to play the game if this is the case. Right. This is the problem. If there's no punishment for playing the game, and they did, I believe Georgia played the game and lost last year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that's the case again, then there is no reason to have the playoffs.
But the committee has told us that as an SEC team, first off, one, you don't have to win the conference to get in the playoffs.
I don't think that's true anymore.
And two, I would take a one, and I know LSU under this circumstance, I know LSU would have to beat.
But in your scenario, you're saying
LSU over LSU.
You're saying LSU wins the SEC, beats Georgia, they don't get in the playoffs, and Georgia gets in.
Yes,
we've seen it happen.
We're in a 14. We are in a 14.
We have not seen this happen.
But we are in a 14 playoff
We
scenario.
have not seen a conference champion or conference championship loser get in over the team that beat them. We have not seen that.
But
we've seen both get in. We've seen both teams get in.
Right,
We have
because they were in a position for that to happen. This time it's not Georgia, and again, unless it's a 3-touchdown plus blowout.
If LSU blows out Georgia, it's a different conversation. But what we have seen is we've seen a 2-loss conference champion not get in on the same circumstance of that 2-loss team beat the 1-loss team. And it's because I'll go back Ohio State and Penn State.
But the team that they beat in the conference championship wasn't the by far best team in the country. Big difference.
But what I'm saying is if LSU wins the conference as a 2-loss conference champion, there should be no guarantee that they get in, or else we open up. I'll tell you like this. If LSU gets in as a 2-loss conference champion, then it makes, you know who the biggest winners are, Jeff? Everybody who said the college football playoffs should be more than 4 teams.
I say that every week. My
constant
constant winner every week is everybody who wants more teams. Like this is another week that proved that like we need to let 12 teams in, allow teams to get better, allow teams to figure out who they are, quit worrying about the loss column. 100%. I say it every week.
Makes it BS that they get in, and we're sitting here watching other teams who are going to have starters not play. Because let's just be honest, the New Year's Six Bowl is not a bowl full of bowl games full of guys who are going to play at their best. Yeah, if LSU gets in as a 2-loss conference championship team, then the biggest winners come your episode this time will be the 12-team playoff guys who are pitching, because that's BS. And if LSU gets in, here's my biggest thing. If LSU gets in, then you know what it tells me? That the regular season doesn't matter, and under any circumstance, whether it's beginning of the season or end of the season, the regular season doesn't matter. Because if LSU not beating Florida State, if that doesn't matter, then you're telling me the regular season doesn't matter.
I'll ask you this, my last question before we get to biggest losers, though. If we want if we're going to factor in the regular season and that matters that much, then we have to start finding a way to factor in like terrible wins, like Clemson, Ohio State, like
I'll
who
give you that.
stumbled. Like we have to also do that. Like it's not fair to punish a team for like a close loss.
I'll give you that. But Ohio State.
But if you win, we completely erase it.
But
Like,
Ohio
nobody
State
cares.
finish undefeated. And
Ohio State has got their ass kicked.
Won't matter.
Out of the last 3 games, 12 quarters of football, Ohio State's got their ass kicked probably 10 of those quarters.
But
Ohio
Ohio
physically got their ass kicked, but because they didn't lose, they're number 2 in the country. That doesn't make any more sense than, allowing LSU in because our eyeballs. Like that's just a fact.
LSU has lost 2 games though. They lost to Florida State at the beginning of the season, and they got smacked by Tennessee. So if we're going to take LSU and we're going to play the transitive property.
No, we're not doing that. We are absolutely not doing it. Nope, we're not doing that. Okay. I don't do that.
You're right, but I won't play the
I am saying I don't care about I do not care about the Florida State loss.
So the regular season doesn't matter.
And
then.
I don't care. It
has to matter because if you're telling me that LSU.
I get your point, Mo. I get your point. I know
if LSU with 2 losses doesn't matter, then we're saying that the regular season doesn't matter.
The problem with that is, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll go to losers. This is why every team should have Michigan's schedule, because there is no reward whatsoever to play a good opponent right now in college football if this is the case. LSU should have scheduled Central Michigan instead of Florida State, and they would be in the playoffs right now. That's my problem with college football. Because of what you're saying.
I don't disagree with you on that.
That's the problem.
All I'm saying is
Michigan canceled. You know why Michigan canceled UCLA? Because of everything you're saying. There's absolutely no reward to playing a tough game because we only care about the loss column.
I don't disagree with you on that, but all I'm saying is like, if we're gonna schedule, here's my thing, and real quick, and we'll go to the biggest losers. If we're gonna make schedules matter, then Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, and we'll say Oklahoma only because of the past 5 to 6 years. Their Power 5, their Power 5 team that they should play should all be each other. They should all have to play.
We all agree with that.
That's all I'm saying. I know we all agree, but all I'm saying is like, if we're going to schedule outside of your conference and we're going to schedule a Power 5, that Alabama should be playing Ohio State or Michigan.
That's what I'm saying. Like Oregon is number 2 in the country right now if they don't schedule Georgia.
Like, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
But they did, and so now they'll be on the outside of the top 4 looking in, hoping that it's not even hoping it's going to happen. Ohio State or Michigan is going to lose the Ohio State or Michigan game. So it's going to happen where Oregon gets to sit on the outside looking in, and the inevitable is going to happen. But at the same time, all this proves is that there should be 12 teams in the college football playoffs. Exactly. Because we shouldn't even be having this conversation for the simple fact if there was 12-team playoffs,
we wouldn't have to worry about it.
It wouldn't even be a conversation.
100%. All right, we'll do biggest
then
losers.
We wouldn't have this type of conversations. This creates a lot of buzz and controversy. People,
we're college football. Trust me, dude.
We all agree.
I grew up when we voted on college champs. Like there was always conversation. It'll be fine. Us maniac college football fans will always find something stupid to talk about. So biggest losers. We're going to start with Rob Cruz because he's a guest on the show for the first time. We haven't given him enough to talk about. He's one of the brightest football minds I know. So, Cruz, give me some of your losers.
Oh, Alabama has to be
it's a tough
probably the biggest loser. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head the last time that Alabama was not in the top 10. And I think they're 11 right now in the AP poll. Oh, no, they are 10.
Yeah.
They're 10 in the AP. They're 11 in the coaches poll. So I like this is like, I don't remember this being a thing since before what's our Nick Saban got to Alabama. Another biggest loser, I think USC. You know, hear me out. When Lane Kiffin was hired, you know, everybody talked about that air raid offense, the spread offense, put up 40, 50 points a game. which we have. And one thing I said at the time, and I continue to say, is he also brought that Big 12 defense over with him. and it's kind of an oxymoron to
You're
call it
talking
a Big
about
12
Lincoln
defense.
Riley.
Yes.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin was a minute
Lane
ago.
Kiffin.
I don't even know why I said that. That's how bad. That's how irritated I was with last night's game. Was it brought back Lane Kiffin vibes? No, but just so Lincoln Riley, he brought over the Big 12 defense, and which is non-existent. We're up 20 at one point. I literally went upstairs to go make something to eat. I come back downstairs. It's a 7-point ball game. Don't know how that happened. I don't want to know how it happened, but it happened. Going up against it, let's say USC is able to run the table, beat UCLA, beat Notre Dame, beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, get either that 4 or 3 spot. I don't think Georgia is losing to LSU, so you're looking at most likely having to play a Georgia team that knows what defense is, that can also put points on the board. I don't think that's not a recipe for success.
No, that's fair because I mean Ohio State was kind of that way for the last few years. Like it didn't matter what you scored if you were going to give up scores. And I do see that they gave up 406 yards to Cal's quarterback. So I
But you
I
notice
can't
you said
argue
Cal's
with you.
quarterback. You didn't say his name. All you said was Cal's quarterback.
Yeah, his name's Plummer,
Good for
but
him.
I don't know him.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's not actually a plumber. That's a fun fact. So I see where you're coming with it. Like as someone who had a team that didn't have a defense, we don't know if they have a defense now or not, but we know they didn't have a defense for like 3 years. I see where you're coming with it because you're like, well, that's great. You can score, but if you just give up a score right after that, winning by 6, whether it's 6-0 or 41-35 is the same thing. So I see what you're going for there, but you got to be happy though. Like Williams is awesome. Like, but you guys can score.
I'm happy because we've been poverty for the last decade. That part I'm happy with.
That's USC's been a pretty good team that they've just lost stupid games. They've just lost stupid games.
We had one good year. We had one good year when Sam Darnold came in and replaced Max Brown. That's because nobody knew who Sam Darnold was.
Max Brown, big on TikTok right now. It's hilarious.
Good for him. And then after that, it fell off again. And then it took having Clay Helton he's a terrible coach. He's an awesome motivator and a good person, but as a head coach, it's going to cut it. So yeah, for having a couple good seasons over the last 10-ish years, yes, I'm happy that we're winning ball games. I'm happy that we're in the top 10. I'm happy that we are in a position to essentially control our own destiny to get into the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm looking at the teams ahead of SC, the potential matchups. If we're able to get a 3-2 matchup against TCU, I'll be fine with that because TCU doesn't play defense either. I think we can beat them in a shootout. But you're looking at a team like Michigan or Georgia or possibly Ohio State, where we actually have to play a defense. 1 to 2 stops, we're done.
That's fair. I don't think that's a horrible assessment. I mean, I think you're kind of spot on with that, and I get it. Like, I think that's I think that's pretty accurate. You're lucky enough to be in position to make the playoffs, but you also see that they're vulnerable. Chris LeBron, losers this week.
I don't feel bad for you. You guys won the game and you're top 10. You scored a touchdown. Okay, so
are you allowed to talk about losers?
My loser, and it's kind of obvious what my loser is. It's the Miami Hurricanes. We have not scored a touchdown in 8 straight quarters. Okay, 8. That's 2 football games. We had a whole football game last week where we went 4 quarters and 4 overtimes and did not score a touchdown. We finally almost sold out, a home game against our rivals and laid an absolute goose egg. Like, no heart, no passion. It was an absolute embarrassment. We scored 3 points. 3 points. That's just unacceptable. So when you guys cry and you get upset that your team only won by 40 points. We only beat Iowa by 41. We only beat Cal by 7 points. We're ninth, man. We've been so bad. Oh, we're only ninth. Oh, God, Lincoln Riley. Oh, the defense. Oh, I just laugh at you guys with your entitledness, with your eliteness. Like, it's just disgusting. My team is 4-5. Where we just paid a coach $100 million to come here to fix things around. While we're seeing other coaches, Lincoln Riley, first-year coach at USC, doing very good, very well, top 10.
Oregon,
US, the
Oregon
coach left Oregon, and they are a top 10 team.
Oregon, USC, and LSU all have first-year coaches.
First-year coach, and just beat Alabama, and now they're top 7. It's inexcusable. And listen, I get it's not his players. And he has a good recruiting classes coming in, so I do have hope. But to say that this is what I expected year one, it's an absolute, it's just unacceptable what's going on in Miami. And I'm not asking for his head or anything, but
this is crazy.
It's unacceptable to be under 500 and not a bowl team. I didn't think they were good at their ranking coming in. I didn't think they were a top 15 team. I thought that was just because they want Miami to be good. So it's like with Texas and all those USC, they want them to be good. So the minute they have some type of success, they're going to rank them high. They should not be where they're at. They just lost to their rivals by 40 plus points. It's unacceptable. That's like you guys losing to Michigan by 40 plus points, or USC losing to Notre Dame by, it's just unacceptable. You can't lose to your rivals by 40 plus points. It's unacceptable.
Miami.
I was watching the game laughing. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, turnover. Oh,
Miami has scored 82 points in their conference play.
Yeah, it's been a rough year. The court, TVD has not looked great. He got hurt yesterday, and the quarterback, receivers have been dreadful. The defense, I thought against Texas A&M, they look like they can play with in the trenches with the bigger teams in the SEC or just overall. And I'm like, okay, even though we lost, there was a lot of good in that, but they just, the Middle Tennessee game, the amount of 80-yard plays I felt like they had, it's just the discipline on defense isn't there. Just the physicality is not there. The quarterback playing inconsistent, wide receivers inconsistent. It's been rough. It's been a rough year, but the recruiting classes, he does have good recruiting classes coming in, and some big boys up front that are going to help the physicality with Miami. And I think next year we could be but this year they're my losers by far. And it's not even just because I'm a Miami fan. I think most people would say that they're the losers after yesterday's loss, because that was embarrassing. Absolutely on pretty bad primetime TV, where you have a time, packed house. Well, for them, it's a packed house, and that their campus being so far away is ridiculous too. But that's a hope for now. Hopefully, that rich guy in Miami gets them a new stadium. But it's unacceptable. You can't do that, especially against your rivals. Come on now, that's unacceptable. Disgusting loss, but that's it. I could do 2 hours on them, but they're just. Texas A&M too is disappointing too, and that's they're maybe greater. That may be greater, but for me, since it's personal with me,
and A&M has a record on losers since they lost App State. So
class ever is 3-6.
Yeah, they're terrible. All right, Mo. Biggest losers.
First off, one is Texas A&M, because they suck
again.
And yeah, under the circumstance, I know they play Florida. I know they play Anthony Richardson, who everybody hopes is a first-round quarterback. But at the end of the day, you got to see how much talent you had with all the players out, and you don't have as much talent as you thought you had. So Texas A&M. Two is the biggest loser of the weekend really has to be Clemson, because we knew Alabama, we knew they were one loss away from being a team who's out of the playoffs, right? But we look at Clemson and we're like, if they lose a game, we're talking about an undefeated team. If they lose a game, they're going to need the absolute most help to get into the playoffs. Like, we know, like, okay, Alabama's gone. They got 2 losses. They're done. But when it comes to Clemson, they have to be the biggest loser for the simple fact they're going to need a lot of help. And we can start drawing up scenarios as far as what'll help Clemson. And I still don't think it's enough for Clemson to make the playoffs. So them getting smacked essentially by Notre Dame has removed them as a playoff team because it has proven everyone who thinks Clemson is overrated, not as good as we thought they were, whatever. It proved true against Notre Dame. And I was a guy who picked Notre Dame to beat Clemson because I felt Clemson was not as good as everybody thought. So I would have to say, if I pick a biggest loser, it's got to be Clemson for the simple fact you're a team who has a loss. You're a team who could win the conference and still be a one-loss conference champion. And you could be basically, in the word, assed out on the winning stick as far as getting in the college football playoffs, because that one loss of you getting blown out by Notre Dame kind of tells everybody what we needed to know about Clemson. So I'm going to say Alabama because they got their second loss, but we knew if Alabama got their second loss, they would be out. It's Clemson. Like, it's Clemson and Texas A&M. Texas A&M sucks, and we're in a position now where Jimbo Fisher could be getting fired, and we're talking about how much money it costs to fire Jimbo Fisher, and we're like, no, there's no way in hell that happens, but there is a world where Jimbo Fisher gets fired because he had one of the top recruiting classes for the past 2 years and not even bowl eligible sitting as of right now. But to me, it is Clemson and it's Dabo Swinney and, you know, that whole DJU is Steph Curry. Yeah, sorry, Jeff, but Dabo
that was
my ass.
That was uncalled for.
DJU is the next.
Clemson got beat by a quarterback that threw for 85 yards. In modern college football.
That not only did they lose, if you lost because the other quarterback didn't throw for 85 yards and your quarterback didn't play that great, okay. But you benched your quarterback, brought in another quarterback. He played like dog crap. So you brought back in your starting quarterback. And at the end of the day, Notre Dame proceeded to still make you look like trash no matter who you put under center. Clemson's the biggest loser. You know why? Because they told us everything we needed to know about Clemson. They're trash. And we're not gonna respect them, and they're not gonna beat Drake May in North Carolina. And North Carolina is gonna finish as one-loss ACC champions, which in 2 weeks will cause a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, shout out to North Carolina.
That hurts North Carolina, though, Clemson losing, though.
I think it helps.
I think it helps because you're going to still get clout for beating Clemson. And Drake May, who
they don't, but the problem with them beating Clemson, they don't have to worry about the situation to where, like, who gets in.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying is,
remember to have with Notre Dame,
Clemson.
There was a year when Notre Dame and Clemson both got in.
Yeah.
Last year,
and they played each other.
If Clemson kept winning and USC beats them in the AC, they could have maybe backdoored their way to a playoff potentially.
Oh, that's true. I see what you're
saying.
That's
what I'm saying.
They would have got more.
They just needed Clemson to keep winning.
No, that's true.
So they can beating an undefeated Clemson, who's top,
would have got a little more credit.
Top 3. It would have gave them an extra.
Now basically
a top 4 team. Regardless of how we feel about Clemson, it's still a top 4 team versus undefeated.
Gotcha.
Clemson.
You're saying ACC is basically eliminated.
Yeah. So now ACC to me is eliminated.
They were actually one of my.
We talked about that last time. Like, North Carolina could backdoor their way to maybe the playoff if Clemson stood undefeated.
ACC was kind of a loser of the weekend because of that. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think North Carolina. Not that they losing for losing, but like they lose because Clemson lost. That hurts them.
Which is stupid. Again, this is so dumb. As much as I love the games, like that's a dumb way to run a sport. You guys covered all the teams. We talked about Alabama. We talked about, it didn't matter to OSU because of they're waiting for the Michigan game, but they look dreadful. Twitter lit them on fire, which they should have been. Ryan Day has a lot of questions to answer. The offensive line looks soft, this and that. Like OSU was a big loser for the weekend, but it didn't cost them anything. That's the only reason they didn't make my list, because it just didn't cost them anything. They're still going to be ranked in top 4 if they win out. They're fine. So I'm losers for watching that game and having that it actually took place. But other than that, what they got by with one. That's all I can say. They got by with one.
That's a W.
So some of the biggest losers, quarterback prospects. I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud both this weekend. If I'm an NFL team, I'm like, that guy can't beat Green Bay in January. Like that's what I would take away from this weekend, is that the college quarterback prospects. Will Levis is, I think he's already, I know he'll still get, me and Mo already talked about it. He's still going to get drafted high because he's big and white, but he's proven he's kind of not that dude. I think Young and Stroud have both exposed themselves of like arm strength and in toughness and size and athleticism and all these things that we need a quarterback to have. And if I'm an NFL team and I watch CJ Stroud versus Northwestern, I'm like, well, how's that guy going to win me a game in Soldier Field? Or if I see Bryce Young, I'm like, man, if he's getting pinballed like that, in college, like, how's he going to hold up in the pros? So I think the quarterback prospects in general, I know they may still get drafted where they want to, but I think if you're really watching, I do not see an NFL, and I grade NFL quarterbacks based on can you go to the playoffs or win a playoff game. I don't care if you can start for the worst team in the country. Like, I care if you can win a playoff game. I don't see a playoff winning quarterback in this quarterback class of college football players after this weekend. So they were some of my losers right there.
I agree on that. They definitely have taken a hit. We came into the season thinking there was going to be
this was a good quarterback class.
Quarterback class. And I think, with Bryce, I think with him is the durability issues are going to be a major thing.
He's a little dude.
He's a little dude. And yes, he's a gamer. And when the chips are down, like he can bring you back. But like you say, I think
Hooker's peaked and he's an old college quarterback. I think he's a really good one, but I think he's just like, if he was going to be this good, he would have been this good. I know the circumstances are different at Tennessee. This is again, I talked about this earlier in the week with Stewart. We need to start drafting backup quarterbacks, like project quarterbacks, like we used to. Like, let's give this guy 7 years. Like maybe he's Geno Smith. Instead of like, if you draft a guy, like if he's not playing in year 1 or 2, he's a bust. Like, the NFL has to get past that. But like, there's nothing wrong with drafting CJ Stroud in the third round of the NFL draft and being like, in 5 years, I think you're our quarterback.
He'll be a starter. He could still be a
starter. Right, but that's not what's going to happen.
Third round pick,
or Bryce Young, like, hey, we want you on the team. We want to see what you can do. We want to see if you can get thicker. That's not what they do with these guys, and I don't. I just as I watched as a whole, I'm like, I don't see an NFL quarterback.
DJ is another guy we thought was going to be,
he should be a star.
Was supposed to be a number one pick, and he hasn't lived up. So there's a lot of disappointments at quarterback this year, and it's like, if you need a quarterback in this draft, like, you're kind of like, okay, if you need a franchise quarterback per se, like if you're like a Tampa Bay, maybe you take a Bryce Young or CJ Stroud late, because you're like, all right, we got Tom. He's going to play maybe he plays one more year, and we could have him behind Tom for another year, or Green Bay or teams like that have an older quarterback or so, or like the Giants, for instance, like they're kind of figure out what their quarterback situation is. That'd be good. But like, if you need a franchise quarterback, like who's the bottom teams right now that need franchise quarterbacks at the moment that would feel good about? All right, we'll take Bryce Young or Stroud.
Nobody's tanking. Nobody's tanking for any of these guys.
And that's the thing. Are there? I don't know if there's a quarterback right now that's in the pipeline in the next few years that's like, okay, that guy, like Trevor Lawrence, like everyone was like, okay, in 3 years.
So him and Fields both. Like we
knew those guys were like, we're gonna tank for those guys in 3 years. I don't know, unless you guys are thinking. I can't think of a quarter. And last year we didn't have anyone, right? I can't think there was a quarterback like
Pickett didn't go to the middle of the draft,
and he's 24. He's an old. So like, I don't see anyone. Maybe next year we might, or 2 years. Like, but there's not that guy that you're like, okay, well, that's a bona fide. He's gonna be a superstar. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't know that. So that's the thing. Quarterback play hasn't been as good as in college as we're accustomed to. It's more like you're taking defensive ends now. You're taking tackle. You guys have a tackle that might be top 5. There's pass rushers, there's cornerbacks, there's the like wide receivers. Like quarterback is kind of like we're kind of like, okay, why is the quarterback position kind of regressing a little bit in college?
That's a great question. That's a whole show I would like to do.
Yeah. I think you should do that because that would be a very good, very good show.
And I know a lot of the reasons, but it is hard to figure out. And it's the biggest question is, before we get on to what we learn, is like, how do you find quarterback prospects?
It's so
like,
hard.
how do you decide like who's good or who's bad? When you consider the way everything's done now. So that'll be another show. So let's get on to what do we learn? What did we learn from week 10 of college football? Here's what I learned. What did I put on there? Oh man, I lost it. I wrote it down too. I'll let you guys go first and I'll remember what I learned.
I'll go first. Alabama is trash and their season is over.
It was with the buzzer twice. How are they trash?
Yeah, they suck. Okay. Alabama season is over. They're not going to the college football playoff. They get to see what it looks like playing in a Rose Bowl that nobody gives a damn about. Shout out to Alabama. Alabama sucks. Bryce Young's face after they lost that game yesterday with Jaden Daniels making that throw was priceless. And I'll tell you why it's priceless, because he knew it was a look of my season is over. And so guess what Alabama gets to do? They get to go play Tulane in a New Year's Six Bowl where Bryce Young's not going to play and any other draft eligible player is not going to play in that game. You know why? Because their season was a failure. So what I learned is Alabama is trash. And you know what else I learned? Ohio State ain't national champions like everybody think. And I'm not going to go on a rave. All I'm saying is Ohio State is not the team that everybody wants them to be. For the simple fact, this is 3 weeks in a row. They struggled against a halfway decent defense. Northwestern was 1-7, and you didn't get
Northwestern's defense wasn't decent. It was the 100th best rushing defense in the country.
And that's even worse. But what I'm saying is Ohio State is not the national championship contender that everybody wants. But we're not making this about Ohio State. We're making this about Alabama being trash and they're not going to the college football playoff. You know why? Because Bryce Young couldn't come up big in a big time situation. He lost.
Did come up big.
He did.
Yeah, he did in a loss. Cool. Yeah, he came up big against Hendon Hooker too in a loss. Cool. Sounds good. You played great in a moment where you lost 2 games. Don't care. Alabama is trash.
That's unfair. It
is 100%.
Here's a funny thing.
No, it's not
It's
fair.
100% fair.
Here's what's funny. Bryce
Stroud
let him down.
CJ Stroud plays absolutely amazing and loses a game. Guess what? Yeah, he played great, but guess what he did? He lost.
Jeff will want him executed
Bryce Young
on the field.
Bro,
Guillotine on the 50-yard line.
Bro, I'm so over. Like, CJ Stroud hasn't won a game yet at Ohio State.
What I learned is Alabama trash, and Bryce Young let them down, and they didn't win a game. That's what I learned this weekend. Is Alabama's trash, and their playoff hopes is about as dead as my ankle. So shout out to Alabama.
Oh, all right, Cruz. What did you learn this week in college football?
So I will go. Let me first start by saying I didn't necessarily learn it, but it was more so very much 1,000% confirmed that the College Football Playoff Committee does not actually care about the rankings. They care about making money and getting viewers, and that is it. Tennessee had no business being number 1. I get it; they won all their games. Good for them. You still had the defending national champions.
Cruz,
who would you have put number? Where would you have put Tennessee though?
Cruz, you had
4.
You had to put
4. What?
4.
Why
You
would
think Tennessee is
you don't
worse than
have to
Ohio
put them-
State?
Real quick, Jeff, I just want to say this. Cruz, you had me. I was following you as far
Me
as
too. I had to
playoff
boat fired up, headed to Cruise Island.
Yeah, I was ready to stay the night for the next 5 nights.
Oh yeah, I was pitching a tent
until you told me that
starting a fire.
Tennessee did not deserve to be number one. I feel like Tennessee had to be proven that they're not the best team in the country, which they did. But going into this week,
saying I want to keep in mind here, like,
wow,
I know Georgia looked way better, but Tennessee was within 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. Like that game wasn't.
Yeah, Georgia gave up. Well,
it doesn't matter though. I'm like, if they get a big play, like they didn't. Georgia was clearly better, but the blowout wasn't as dynamic as it seemed.
Yeah, because
anyway, go ahead, Cruz. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cruz.
Yeah, my bad.
So
that's our bad.
So to you guys, no, you're good. You're good. So to your point, that you still have the defending national champions sitting there and have not lost the game. If you want to sit here and say, well, Tennessee needed to be proven that they weren't the best, why didn't Georgia have to be proven that they weren't the best? Coming off a national championship, brought back their quarterback.
No,
brought back a lot of people. They lost.
No, I would have been fine with Georgia being one.
But Kent State.
I would have lived with it.
Kent State, Missouri.
Here's what the committee was hoping for. Was hoping for an overtime game or a field goal, on the last play of the game, so that way you could knock down Tennessee to 4, maybe 5.
Yes.
Clemson, I think we can all agree, had absolutely no business at number 4.
Trash.
And we see why. Nobody had faith in them. Because here's something that I think was it last week that Dabo Swinney pulled DJ and benched him.
Yeah, he called him Steph Curry while he pulled him.
Yeah, he even said, "Oh, Steph Curry has off nights." Like,
and actually, Steph really doesn't have off nights. Like you guys are the NBA experts.
With your starting quarterback, the psyche
benching your starting quarterback to Steph Curry
to put in a freshman,
even in the off night, gives us 5 threes. Yeah, it's crazy.
So Clemson had no business at 4. TCU absolutely disrespected, as we spoke about earlier. They do what they needed to do. Like we said earlier, everything fell into place how we expected it to and how it should have. But at the same time, like if you're gonna do it this early, like even Jeff alluded to it, or he even outright said it, if you're just gonna mess around with it and just try to get storylines, like just don't do it. Just wait until just wait until conference championship week and then do it then. This is clearly just for ratings and for money, which good for them. I will say though, they did get the LSU thing right. A lot of people were hating on that.
Their top 10 teams wasn't bad. It was just the order.
Right.
Nice.
But a lot of people were knocking, like, I mean, you too, Jeff. I'm not to call you out on your own show, but you said the only reason they have LSU there was, one, they're playing Alabama, but more importantly, the game is on ESPN, getting viewers, which it worked out.
All I'll ask is this, and I promise I am not excusing myself because I totally agree with what I said, what you're saying. The question I would ask is, if that 2-point conversion is incomplete, and that's one play of one game, we're all on here saying the committee is an idiot for putting LSU at 10.
I don't think so.
What I'm saying is it was paper thin. So LSU is as polarizing as it was last week. Kind of both sides were right.
I think if that 2-play was incomplete, I think we're talking about not that they're idiots. It was still a close game. You could still argue that they should have been. They definitely had.
But I would say we would have said they should have been
lost though. Like LSU loses that game if they don't complete that 2-point play. They have their 3rd loss. And so all I'm saying is, like, my only thing about LSU, real quick, because Jeff, you and me were riding together as far as I think they're number 10 because they're playing Alabama this week, is nobody has answered me the question, why was LSU 10 and not Utah? Utah has
I don't have the answer.
And they beat USC, but nobody can tell me why, hey, why don't we put Utah 10 as opposed to LSU? And the common ground is LSU is playing Alabama this week as opposed to Utah wasn't. And so I'm not killing LSU because those who thought that LSU should have been number 10 is like, oh, well, look, they won, and that's exactly why they're number 10. My thing is the
So did
AP
Utah.
poll had them right. The AP poll had them right at 15, and now you have to prove to me why you're a top 10 team while sitting at 15.
They could have made it
Alabama team.
Yeah, our argument was they could have made it take longer, but it now it's a moot point because LSU does have the win. But to agree with Cruz,
your point, though.
the committee absolutely they got a tough week now. Now they got a tough week because now they got to reorder everything and sort all this out. And now they have to commit to how good they think LSU and TCU are. Like now they have some real decisions to make. They have to. What are they going to do with Ohio State? Like I don't see how you can leave Ohio State at 2 after that performance. Because then if you're going to say it's a loss column, then Mo's right. Then you just have to go down through like, well, you have to be undefeated.
Which, yeah, if you're in the top 4, like we've known this, you just have to go undefeated and you're fine. You're not going to be touched.
No, but I'm saying like when they rank them, the committee, when they rank them, like what you're alluding to is like, if they're going to be honest to themselves, if they leave Ohio State at number 2, then what they're saying is all that matters is the loss column. So then what do you do with LSU? Like what I'm agreeing with, and also what Mo says, that's what we had the problem with the committee is they talk out both sides of their mouth. Like if you're going to leave every undefeated, like if you're going to leave Ohio State at 2, then you're saying all that matters is a win. Well, then LSU has to be behind TCU.
Yep.
And that's not going to happen. So they're going to have to do two completely separate things. But that's for Tuesday night. Chris, what'd you learn this week?
What I learned this week that
about the forward pass,
that touchdowns do happen in games. I did learn that. Oh man, that game, painful. I learned two things that I think I'm maybe convinced that the 12 team is ideal because situations like we're having now, I think it might benefit. And nobody wants the Heisman. And it also feels very underwhelming. Like it doesn't feel like we have that.
Good. I like this one.
It feels very underwhelming. The Heisman race and the candidates. I don't like that. Like one bad game takes you out, but it just feels like there's not candidates that you feel like are they're Heisman guys, in my opinion. Like I know we got the quarterbacks and all that. Blake Curran from Michigan's doing good and all that. But it just feels very underwhelming. Then like there's no clear cut, favorite right now. And no, that just feels very disappointing right now. That race. So it
feels like it's going to come. It feels like it's going to come down to either one of two things. Which quarterback plays the best in his like rivalry game at the end of the season?
Whether Stroud could win it versus Michigan.
Whether it be Stroud, whether it be Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams is not a Bo Nix. Bo Nix is still in it. Or whether it's going to be, or they're just going to give it to Blake Corum and be like, we couldn't pick a quarterback, so we gave it to the best running back, like they do when they did that with Alabama a couple times, to where like just give the Heisman to the best running back, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry situation. Like that feels like where it's at. But that is a true thing.
Yeah.
We a couple seconds here. Who like NFL prospect wise?
Ooh,
your team's picking number 1, or if they had their pick of any player, who is the most standout player in college football right now that's draft eligible this year? Because I honestly don't know the answer. I thought Will Anderson was going to be, and I know he's still going to be a great NFL player, but he's not as dominant as I thought he would be.
I agree on that.
Stroud, for everything I've already said, isn't that actually, by the way, we'll just tag this on my what did I learn? I forgot. I looked at my notes. It was there's not an NFL quarterback in this draft. So that was my what did I learn?
Number one, like
right now, who would you pick for your team, whether it be the New York Giants or the Washington Commanders?
I mean, if I'm the Giants right now and we have, let's say we have the number 1 pick.
You can pick anybody. Yeah, you can pick anybody.
Will Anderson would be ideal because I could pair him up with, we would have a 3-headed monster at pass rush. And to me, that's the Giants. Their, history says when they have that pass rush, they do really good things.
That's true.
You know, Justin Tuck, OC Strahan in 07, you know, JPP, OC Tuck, you know, in 11, and you have that with Thibodeau, Ojolari, and you had Will Anderson. I mean, that would be absolute tremendous. I feel like we've kind of shored up that tackle spot. That would have been ideal, you know, but there's no one. I don't like taking corners that high, and there's no Sauce Gardner. I don't believe, you know. I know the Porter kid, Joey Porter's kid in Penn State's pretty good.
He's pretty good. Yeah.
Georgia has a couple guys and all that, but I would if the Giants had the number 1 pick, I would probably take Will Anderson, even though he hasn't been as dominant as his.
And he's really good.
He's been good though. I think he like leads the country in like and tackles for loss. And
his impact is huge. Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of guys out there. It's just like, to your point, like it hasn't been like, oh my God, this. Stroud started off that way. Like it was going to be like, oh my God, this stats he's going to put up, but he's totally backed off.
Like I think you want the picks outside like the top 10. Like top 10, I don't think there's that one franchise true game changer.
Yeah.
But I think if you in the team, like from 15 on, that's where you get the value. I believe in this draft that I've seen so far. I haven't really.
I think this is a draft where teams want to have picks. Cruz, anybody that stands out in your mind? Anybody you've seen this year that you want?
You talking just overall or from a quarterback perspective?
No, anybody. You can pick anybody in college football, like anybody that just jumps off the page at you.
No.
It's kind of a weird year. Like that's what I mean. That was a great point.
That's what I'm saying with the class and all that, like quarterbacks and just overall, it seems like the talents, like that blue chip talent, is not there right now.
And now we find out a lot in these next few weeks too, because we get to see the rivalry games and we get to pay more attention. Like Georgia, a lot of us didn't really watch Georgia last year until the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And then we started watching this defense and we started watching
Trayvon Walker.
We started watching Dean and all these guys. Yeah. Exactly. And then we're like, oh, they really jumped off the page. But it is like right now, like if you're like like for instance, Ohio State, I watch them more thoroughly than I do anybody else. They got Eichenberg and Ransom up for big awards this year.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of those guys are starting NFL players.
Yeah.
And they're up for major awards. Same way with Stroud. Stroud may or may not be a starting quarterback depending on the team he goes to and the position he gets put in. But he's not like. Yes, he's definitely a starter in the NFL. To me, I know everybody else, say I'm crazy, but I know what my eyeballs see. So that's my point, is like a lot of these guys that are like the best at their position aren't standing out. So what I imagine is when the NFL draft comes around, not turn this into an NFL draft show, you're going to talk a lot about like, I've never heard of this guy. I've never heard of this guy, which goes to my point that I say NFL scouts really don't care about college football games. Like they may pick one or two, but they care about certain techniques and stuff that you have, but they honestly don't care about the game as much as they used to. Like for instance, like Blake Corum's going to be, him and Robinson are going to be the 2 best running backs coming out. But then are you going to tell me a team's going to draft them in the top 5, top 10? Like nobody's going to draft a running back like that anymore. No. So it's probably going to be an offensive lineman that we don't even know about. It's probably going to be, maybe
you guys have an offensive lineman, I think.
Yeah. But then
has some guys. Northwestern has a guy, right? I don't know his name. I forgot his name, but wide receiver. Like, what's your guy's name? It's coming off the top of my head. I can't think of the name.
I don't really know who.
Njigba. I can't say.
Njigba. Yeah.
He's someone,
but he hasn't played. That's what I'm saying. He hasn't played.
Yeah. But for you can't need a playmaker like him. Like
absolutely.
But there's always going to be someone, Jeff. That
but what I mean is
not even thinking about.
Point. Nobody's seen him play this year.
Exactly. So there's going to be guys, and we see this. In the NBA draft, we see this. Because especially once we get to the combines. Because listen, the tape is one thing, but what we've seen in drafts, NFL, NBA, is that when you get the tape measures and you get the all these drills. And you get the one-on-ones and all that and 7-on-7s or whatever, that's when you're going to see like, okay, yeah, the tape looks good but like we need this. You have to have measurables. I know it's not everything, but you have to have the measurables. You have to have the speed in order to play at the next level.
It's an odd year of those guys. It's an odd year where the players on the best teams right now don't necessarily the star player, like the names, the quarterbacks, the running backs, don't necessarily translate to the NFL. It's just kind of a weird. It's kind of a weird,
like Will
state that we're
Levis
in.
Will Levis to me is going to be the first quarterback taken. I guarantee
He might be
not
now.
because he's the most he's the best, he has the best stats and all that, but when you get him in the lab,
he's gonna jump off the page.
they're going to fall in love.
They're going to compare him. They're going
to with Wilson, right?
Yep.
My God, he got old. That's why I've been saying he's going to be the first quarterback. I believe he's going to be the first quarterback taken because they're going to be like, they're going to, he's tough. He played at Kentucky, so he's not playing with a bunch of talent like you guys do at Ohio, C.J. Stroud at Ohio State and Bryce at Alabama. Mm-hmm. And he's tough. He has all the measurables. He can move. He has a big arm. He has a bigger arm than Stroud and Young. So they're going to look at that, and teams fall in love with that. It's still it may be
absolutely
it may be foolish. But that's what, and it happens in every type of draft. It happens in the NBA all the time. They fall in love with that, and we've seen changes in scouting in the NBA with that. But they're gonna fall in love with Levis, and he's gonna be QB1, and we're gonna see guys as we get closer to the combines and all these that we're gonna raise. It's Trayvon Walker too. Like Trayvon Walker didn't have the stats at Georgia. Surrounded by endless, potential Pro Bowlers in the league. 6 first-round picks on defense, and he was the number 1 pick because they saw him. They measured him and they're like, oh my God!
How can you pass up on that guy?
How can you pass? He could be freaking the next, Myles Garrett. Like you can't pass. It's hard to pass up on that, and that's something we're going to see. Like nobody wants to pass up on Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has changed, and Josh Allen have changed the way teams are scouting quarterback because nobody wants to be that guy. Damn, we passed up on Patrick Mahomes for whoever was who was those quarterbacks that year that went ahead of him. Whoever went Trubisky. Like we passed up on. Like we looked at Mitch Trubisky's tape and said that guy is better than Patrick Mahomes. And same thing, Josh. Oh, he played at Wyoming. He had played they judged him off one big game he played. I forgot. I think it was against Oregon or something. And then he can't play against good, which to me is ridiculous when you do that with players. That they play one bad game against a good team and he can't play in the next level because he's gonna. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous because it's. I hate when people do that. Nobody wants to be that guy that passes up on those potential franchise game-changing quarterbacks, and that's what you're going to see. Will Levis was the first quarterback because people are going to be like, he's too gifted. We're going to fix him up. We're going to do all that, and we're going to make him.
We'll fix him.
Exactly. Everyone thinks they can fix a quarterback. Every team thinks that they can fix him. So.
Oh yeah. All right. Real quick, not a super heavy schedule next week. But every season, every week counts in college football, not season. What are you guys paying attention to next week?
I'm gonna check the schedule. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we got.
One that jumps off, obviously, Texas TCU. Like that's going to be TCU's last test before the conference championship game. Texas is a good team. We've seen what they can do. They've taken some mysterious losses. This is the one that everybody circled for. Like, can TCU? This is when the committee put TCU down there. They were like, let's see them versus Texas first. This is the week, so that's coming up, and then another one, North Carolina State. North Carolina. With the outside chance that they have, play Wake Forest, a decent team that probably won't, be in the top 25, but still, it's like. Now that you have the outside chance, what do you do with it? Drake May, that might be our Heisman winner. Actually, that's a guy we probably should have announced. And then, everything else is like, can you avoid the upset? High State, Indiana, USC, Colorado, mismatches. LSU, Arkansas is not near as good, but how does LSU handle, coming off of such a dramatic win? Like things like this, matter. But I would say North Carolina and TCU are the two teams that I'm like, how do you handle your shot, so to speak?
Yeah, TCU Texas is going to be big for TCU, but also big for Texas because they can ruin TCU's national championship hopes, and that's a big win for the program. Texas, they've kind of, they had the almost big win versus Bama early in the season, and kind of some ups and downs, but they seem like they're getting back.
Well, that in Texas can't. I mean, they don't want to lose 4 games.
Yeah, you
Like
don't.
that's a big number in college football.
That is.
To lose,
That's a very ugly
like
number too.
Texas has a
lose 4
lot to play for too, as far as like going forward in the future.
Yeah. So just teams are just gonna have to just I don't think we're going to see a lot of upsets potentially, like we saw, this week. Not upsets, but like teams lose.
Yeah.
The way we saw last week. But we might see some, Ohio State, ramp it up against Indiana and lay a nice, 50. I think we might see a lot of teams, prove it. Tennessee might
try to flex their muscle a little.
A lot of flexing. I think Tennessee flexes against Missouri. You guys are going to flex against Indiana. Arkansas, LSU. I know Arkansas is down bad, but that's a game where if you're LSU, you have the high of the Bama win. You're feeling good. You might be back in the national championship picture. Don't take Arkansas lightly. They still got some players. Yes, they've dealt with injuries and all the inconsistency. They've had a really, really disappointing year, but don't take them lightly. Just go in there. Doesn't matter how you get the W, like Jeff. Doesn't matter about style points when you get on the road in the SEC. Win the game, because this could be one where you take it lightly and you're down 7 points in Arkansas in the fourth quarter, and now it's like,
yeah.
So for LSU's sake, take care of business against Arkansas. And get over that a little, because we see this a lot, right? We see that the big win the week before, the fans storm the field, all that, and then teams lay an egg the week after, and it's like that, because if you lose, you national, forget about even thinking about
you're done.
You're done. So this is essentially elimination game,
and it brings Alabama back into it. If LSU loses, it brings Alabama back into it. I'm being serious.
And then Alabama's back in it, and it's like we just talked about Midland being dead, and then Mo's going to be upset. We don't want Mo upset. We don't want to get Mo upset. So, like, take care. This is an elimination game. This is how LSU has to take this as if this is a playoff game.
Every game.
Because if you lose, you're eliminated from the playoffs. So take this serious. Go in there, win the game. Doesn't matter how much.
And if they demolish them, then like I said, everything's erased. They're fine. Exactly. Another one. I'll talk to Cruz about this. He's out there. Oregon plays Washington. I mean, Washington's not ranked, but that's a team that can, like, when they get it together, can put points together. They've only lost 2 games this year. Like they're a non-ranked 2-loss team, which is kind of weird. But when they got things rolling, they got a pretty good offense out there with Michael Penix. So Oregon needs to mind their P's and Q's also, just like you're talking about with LSU. Like, you've got the chance now. Don't screw this up. Cruz, what are you watching this week?
So obviously, I'm watching SC against Colorado, mainly because I'm looking at what Colorado did against Oregon and UCLA, our two ex-opponents. Against UCLA, they put up 17 in a loss. Lost to Oregon 49-10. So, as I've just stated numerous times, our defense very sus. So I want to see how our defense is able to handle Colorado. Is it gonna be another 45-37 ball game? If it is, obviously it's not gonna be good. Washington, Oregon, I am definitely looking at that game. 1, because I do live out here. 2, because that has upset written all over it. I'm gonna lie.
Yeah.
Michael Penix Jr. has, outside even the 2 games and the 2 losses, he's played very well. He has shown flashes. He's played very well majority of the season, and looking to see what he does against this Oregon team. Can he ruin their chances?
He can get in that Heisman race too.
Oh, if he plays big in this game,
he's not dead in it. Yeah, for sure.
That Lamar Jackson, like, he can get that Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, what Louisville was a 3-loss team, a 3-4-loss team. So, like, you never know.
Then I had one more. Alabama Ole Miss, just because it's Alabama Ole Miss.
Well, no, we didn't talk about Ole Miss. Like, Ole Miss is very in play in national championship race.
They're 11th right now.
One loss SEC team. They need some help to win the West, but they're not. They still have a path. It's not as
definitely.
direct as LSU, but they still have a path.
Yeah, they definitely still have a path. But what was the other game I was thinking about that I had that Max Duggan has a chance to flex his stuff and maybe take over that getting that Heisman race.
Oh, TCU is going to get a lot of love this week
Yeah.
because now they're going to move up, and it's going to be permitted to now talk about TCU,
Yeah.
and they got the big game coming up
Yes.
Saturday night
versus
prime
Texas.
time. This is and again, to what Cruz said, this is how the committee set it up, which is a bunch of BS. That they manipulated everything this way, but this is what we get. Everybody's watching TCU Texas on Saturday night, and it's just Texas is like Notre Dame. You get a lot of credit for beating them. Yeah, at the end of the day, we're going to say you beat a 23rd ranked Texas team with 4 losses. But what people are really going to remember is you beat Texas. It's just like USC's got the same thing when they beat Notre Dame. It's a bigger deal. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. That helps, even though regardless of how good you think Notre Dame's going to be. So, fellas, that's it for this week's show. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you, Cruz, for making it. Chris, I think you've been on once before this year.
I believe so.
Yeah, which is awesome. Anytime that I can talk ball with you gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure. So everybody needs to check these guys out on their social media. Check these guys out on their podcast. Chris has, the Off the Ball podcast. Cruz, what's the Washington Commanders podcast? What's that called now? I forget the details.
Commanders in the chat.
Commanders in the yeah. So they, he follows them. So if you're an NFL fan in general, but especially if you're a Washington Commanders fan, you want to check out him and Couch Coach. Those guys are honestly two of the best in the business. They give you a fun take every week, some previews and stuff like that. And again, check out Off the Ball Network for all of our guys. We show up everywhere all week doing different shows. If you follow me, at Jeff Needs Sports, we're also going to do, some overreaction, Monday stuff, this week. The Buckeye Remix will be this week. Mo, who was on earlier, had to go for, scheduling reasons, up in flames. He's also doing a college football show every week called Field Stormers. A lot going on right now at the network. We appreciate everybody. Like, share, review, comments, questions, anything that you can do. We appreciate it. This is why we do it. You help fuel the shows. It's been awesome. Chris, Cruz, it's been a pleasure. You guys are two of the best, and we'll see you soon, guys.